Welcome to Defend's weekly Threat Insights group conversation. I hope everyone's had a chance to take a look at the agenda. We've got a good amount of things to talk about today. I'll just kick it off because I have the first agenda item. So and I see that Andy's here. Hi, Andy. You're a big part of this conversation. So we've been talking a lot about the changes to the security dashboards that were made when we recreated them with GraphQL around pagination. So, at the time we were moving very quickly, we ran into some struggles or challenges around implementing the same type of pagination in GraphQL. So we moved to infinite scroll. Infinite scroll is not ideal for a number of reasons. We've got an issue in 13.1 around pinning the headers that we think is a great temporary measure to improve the customer experience. But this issue that's here in the agenda is the more long-term issue around going back to pagination. And when I say pagination, I don't necessarily mean the exact same pagination we had before, because Aviel did bring to our attention that there are performance concerns around pagination, especially with large lists. I do see that both the issues and the MRs in GitLab are still using the same pagination that we had on the security dashboards before, but they're not using GraphQL. So this ticket needs and this is where I wanted your guys' feedback, especially, is I'm not sure if this requires some kind of a technical spike or if it's just an inflated size ticket, because we know that there are challenges with the technology. I've been told it's both a front end and back end issue. So I wanted to see how this group wanted to approach it. Should I split this off into like a technical investigation issue that would be in 13.1 alongside our temporary kind of measure, unless if Matt, unless the priorities say otherwise, and then it goes into 13.2, but, or do we groom and size this issue that I have in the agenda, just knowing that there are some challenges around the technology that we're using to implement this? I'll be quiet and let other people talk now.
I can jump in. I've seen, you're hearing me, right? The microphone's working.
Go ahead. Yes, I can hear you, Savash.
Yeah, so I've seen that Sam, he recorded a video regarding the GraphQL pagination. I think there is an ongoing bug with the Apollo queries. So the next page and previous page cursors, they're not consistent. So that's the only reason why it was, if I'm not mistaken, that was the major reason why we didn't do the pagination. So if it's still ongoing, I'm not sure how we can, so that needs investigation.
Exactly, and I tried to capture that from the Slack thread in this issue. So thank you for summarizing that, Savash. So I wasn't clear on whether the bug was something in our implementation or in the library that we're using. It's in the library, okay. Or if, like you said, if it's been resolved. I mean, I couldn't tell from my investigation. So if we can't use pagination, I have to imagine that there's other solutions that are better than the infinite scroll available to us in GraphQL, and we'd want to work with Andy and Matt to find, what the next iteration on this is. Like I said, we're going to be doing the pinning of the headers at the top of the dashboard, which will help for the time being, but we can't move straight to you have X number of results with Y number of pages to view them on, and these requirements that I think Andy gave us yesterday in the ticket, which are very clear, priorities, requirements, however you want to define those, of how we want this behavior to function. Like, what are the must-haves here? So,
I mean, it's probably way too early or anything to be throwing ideas out for that. But if we were to categorize the criticality of the vulnerability into like groupings and be able to shrink and grow them, that would be an option, or somehow breaking them up like that.
So make the list smaller by, I think there's always going to be the view all need, yeah. Right?
Well, there's some thought we put into creating a tabbed list. So based on status. So that could be something that could reduce the number, even though we'd want a number in the tab, but could reduce the overall counts of each individual list.
That's a great thing to keep in mind. I don't know if it solves this problem. I think you'd want to do that in addition to the change in the UX around how they access additional results. Is that right, Andy?
Yes. Yeah, and that could impact the aggregate data that we want to show, right? 340 detected versus 850 vulnerabilities. Like if there's a ton of vulnerabilities, but they're in different states, communicating that ton doesn't really matter as much as communicating the state and severity of like detected or confirmed, like those bite-sized information that our users could desire at this point.
And my thought is, back to the original question, is I think it does need a technical spike.
Great, I see a few nodding heads there. So what I'll do then is convert this issue that we're linking to here into a technical spike. I'll assign it off for a couple of folks to, add a weight to it, add any additional information around what the goal of that spike would be, which would set us up in a future iteration to implement something that everybody's agreed on.
And I mean, my understanding is that there's still a conversation between linked issues and epics, but this probably would be a good candidate for an epic to come out of this one.
And I think there'll be some points of compromise too, because we can do like magic in the experience, right? Like if we're having trouble navigating users back to lists, we can create a preview of the vulnerability, right? So that they're actually never leaving the list. And so on. Like there's different experiences that we can create to solve for these known problems, as opposed to being very black and white, like it has to be pagination. Doesn't necessarily, as long as we can check off many of the 1 through 3 things.
I think that would be part of the spike, is presenting, what are the alternatives to the type of pagination we had before, and then also digging into, the challenges around that. Great, thank you guys for the assistance on that. So we should have that spike issue ready for 13.1, unless, Andy or Matt say that the priority is lower than I believe it is. Okay. The next item on the agenda is a demo. I hope everyone had a chance to watch it ahead of time. I personally did not, but those folks who did, does anyone have any feedback for Svash or questions at all?
Looks great.
It's still not complete, by the way. Thanks. I'm struggling, right? I was struggling with another MR, so I didn't find time to finish the tests, but I should be able, I think tonight I should be able to, or tomorrow morning, I should be able to push it. But I doubt it's going to go out in this.
Gotcha. So it's not going to make it into 13.0. I'm assuming your MRs are also to help the folks that are doing the reviews for them too. Awesome. Thanks, Rush. And then we have a big list of issues for planning breakdown. We definitely have a lot here to talk about. I don't know if we're going to make it through the whole call, but I would like to hand it over. Well, here, does someone else want to drive this part of the conversation? I don't want to keep talking if you guys are tired of listening to me.
Yeah, I can do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so, oh wait, should I share my screen?
Sure.
That would probably be easiest. Hold on a second. Get over here.
Conveniently, the first couple of issues are ones that you've been looking at, so.
How convenient.
Yeah.
Okay. Did I share the right screen? Can everybody see the defend threat insights? Dope.
Yes. The agenda.
Okay, so the first one is display history of an MR created from a remediation. This is something Jonathan and I have been working on, being able to create an MR from the standalone vulnerability page, or I guess we can just start calling it the vulnerability page. This is similar to when you change the status of a vulnerability. It says that Andrew changed it, whatever, an hour ago, and then links to the issue or the status change. This will link to the MR. In terms of what we're doing here, again, we are not necessarily giving estimates, but just making sure that we understand the requirements. So from a front-end perspective, I probably have the most knowledge about this. Seems straightforward to me. It seems like that is answered. Could someone from the back end tell me if they have all the information they need?
Jonathan is the person assigned to this. Do you want to?
I still need to look through it to see if I got the information. Let me take a quick look.
That's fine. So not from a grooming perspective, but just I mean, from a high level, if you haven't looked at it all, I guess it's the same thing. But
I feel like I understand exactly what is being asked.
cool. So in 13.0, we're working on ensuring that we have the ability to support the MR feedback button. This is about taking that the next step to show the history, right?
Yeah, and yeah. So I mean, I'm assuming that would just be a GraphQL implementation to pull that stuff out.
One thing that's been a concern for me is test data for this. This is something that came to our attention kind of late because it's a fairly specific use case. I think Olivier brought this up to us. One thing that I think myself or Tiago can do early on is to help wrangle test cases for this. Does that sound like a good
Test cases.
step?
Test cases. What do you mean? Can you elaborate on that? Like what test cases
test
were you
data.
thinking?
So not every vulnerability has the auto remediation, and then not every auto remediation has a download patch available. In order to be able to test the whole, big picture here, including the history, do we need? Is there help that could be provided around getting vulnerabilities that would meet these criteria, or clarity around what the criteria are and when we should see this, or anything along those lines?
No, I don't think so anymore. It may have been the case initially when we started to create the button to create an MR from a vulnerability, but now that that is merged and we have figured all that out, we know that Yarn remediation is the perfect project to get a lot of these cases.
Cool.
Also, just for clarity's sake, Andy posted in another ticket all the different use cases, and he did not point out a situation where the download patch would be available when the create MR button was available. So there's just, he has laid out all the use cases there. But thank you. Okay, cool. So it sounds like we know what to do here. Next.
Well, I'm saying this one is like a feature parity thing too. It's not something brand new. It is a feature parity.
And it's still available on the MR pipeline security widget view as well.
Okay. Yeah, totally. Which should make that ticket a lot easier because we know exactly it's being done somewhere else. Okay, so this one, detail view for third-party scanner results. So this one, similar to on the vulnerability page, similar to the information given from a scanner like SAST or DAST, we now want to support not SAST and DAST, a third-party provided scanner. Nope, that one still says SAST. That one also says SAST. Do these all just say SAST? It's fine. Just imagine
I think they all say SAST, but they're showing examples of the different information that a third-party generator could scanner could generate for us.
And Alexander, if you'll notice, so the scanner is the type, the specific scanner is white source. So that's how we were distinguishing it, so you know what's being scanned.
I see. Thank you. I did not understand that. One question I had about this is I've opened this one. So this information that's being displayed here is in a slightly different format than what is currently on staging or production. So does this work include updating this details portion to be in this? It's a similar format, it's just slightly different. Does this ticket include like refactoring this details portion to look like this, or not?
I think that's an important question because it does look different. We might need some updated screenshots to have them take a look at what's currently out there and if that actually does need to be changed or if what's out there is appropriate.
Yeah, this was created by another designer prior to the final implementation of first class vulnerabilities that standalone. So they, to me, this is desirable in the way that it's created. So the bolding of the label headers and the way it's laid out.
Okay. Yeah, because currently it looks like this, which is just a little bit different.
Yeah. So yeah, the designs you see that are mocked up for this issue, it would be ideal if we could go that direction.
Okay, cool.
I have a question here. If so that part, as far as I know, that's not a view application, is it? It's not, and we have an issue to migrate this part to be a view application, if I'm not mistaken. So is this work overlapping with that issue? Should we prioritize accordingly?
It's a great question. So we have a ticket that was engineering driven in 13.0, I think maybe 2 tickets actually around turning this whole page into a view application.
Given that this is, we're like just talking about sort of the details of this ticket now, Daniel has put up an MR to convert this to a view application. It's still in WIP, but it does exist. And so that will probably get merged before this even gets started on. And so I think we should be good.
Yeah, I see 2 things that might need to be addressed here, especially the suggested solution is presented differently than how we're presenting it today. And then the issue line underneath suggested fix. I'll sync up with the person who designed this because I think we want to keep that the same as today. That would be a fairly large change. This more or less is about refactoring the way the content is presented, not more holistic UI change. I think we would see down below. Wholesale.
Great. I'm going to add a comment to the issue, Andy, that you're looking at ensuring that the screenshots for the standalone page are updated. We did talk about this last week as well, and Tiago took the action to follow up on some assumptions from our discussion. So if you want to pull the bottom part of that page up, Alexander, you can see his work there. So for the sake of planning breakdown, we've looked at this issue twice now. We've done a bit of homework. We do have 2 issues around this on our list today. This is for the detail view. We have another one for the list view, so looking at the dashboards. Going back to what our questions are for planning breakdown, do we feel like we understand the requirements and what's being asked?
I'm going to say no.
Oh, never mind. No.
Well, I think there's some really good questions that are being called out here, and I question how MVC this is at this moment. So I think Matt and I can take this as a to-do.
Okay, so we'll assign this back to you guys and move it back in the workflow. Matt, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, it may, I think as originally conceived, since this work was done months ago, I think the objective was assuming that that top section was already done in static and it was only going to be some variation of, adding a block to the bottom. I would argue it's just that we need the designs to be brought back in line to clear up any potential confusion with this one. And if it makes sense to split this out into saying, let's just redesign the top section, the detail section of information that already exists, and then make a separate issue for the bottom section for the additional information, that would be, in my opinion, a good cut point if we wanted to try to clean it up a little bit.
And then we wouldn't have to necessarily prioritize the redesign of what we're seeing here over the addition of those extra data fields.
And I will say on that other field, that feels like that could go in the information or description section as well.
Well, so Jonathan, the reason for that is the intent is it's almost like just sort of a generic key value pair section that will not be common across scanners. So information is only things that we have in all of this is gonna sound silly, common to all the common report formats.
I got you. So does that mean like some of the stuff like code snippet and the other parts should also go in the other, like the specific, like it's something specific to the scanner should go in the other category?
That's a really good question. So I think some of that is a little bit more deterministic based on the common report format. Other was, if I'm remembering correctly, was literally just a free form key value pair. You can stuff whatever you want inside of the JSON object, and it's not something that's predefined and known. So I believe from location, there is a code snippet. I think that's already available. I think that was the reasoning for that.
Okay.
I'd have to relook at, but those are good questions. I think we'd want to make sure that those are not potentially going into the wrong section. So I don't know. I think unless anybody disagrees, I'm in favor of just splitting this into two issues. One will just be restyling the top component, or I guess just in general, this kind of header bold label. And then the other will be actually what goes into those blocks in the bottom.
And I see Tiago's comment here that we don't need any back-end work. All the information from these scan results are already available to the front end.
Is that true though?
That's what I'm looking at heads. I'm looking at like nods or shrugs.
I've heard the GraphQL API may have holes. I've heard that from a few people. It's more a question.
Yeah,
well, this information, first of all, like the information that we do show here currently is not from GraphQL. It's just passed up from the Rails application. And so this wouldn't be a GraphQL query. This would be a change to that vulnerability helper, Jonathan, that you touched for the MR button.
Right. So yeah, so there would need to be that change added because it would reside within the JSON. So I don't think it would require a change to the GraphQL schema, but it would require a change to what gets loaded into the GraphQL and also read from on the other.
So let's just reiterate that one more time. The standalone page is not using GraphQL. The standalone page is built with Vue and REST endpoints. It's just the security dashboard that's using GraphQL. So we will have the same discussion on the next issue or two down, probably not today, where we look at the same support for third-party scanners in the dashboard, but the standalone view is, like Alexander said, not using GraphQL yet.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Also, in minor correction, the standalone page, only the header and the footer are using the view view. And then the rest is it's HAML.
But that's getting converted, like we just said, right?
Yeah,
Savas,
exactly.
So in this current, in 13.0/13.1, because it might not make it because it's just getting merged, that's getting converted to use view. So.
Okay.
Sorry, I cut somebody off.
Yeah, the cutoff for 13.0 commits was
Long
last
gone,
Friday.
yeah.
Okay, so yeah, none of this is getting in 13.0. Come on, get over it. All right. So that sounds like this. There's a lot of questions left. So.
But we're going to take this back into the next call. Once it's broken down into two issues, we'll have the one around the redesign of the page that seems very straightforward, or the visual changes to the page with the bolding and such, and then one around absorbing this third-party data in a extensible, flexible fashion.
Right, and this Lindsay, there might be like, I don't know how to get a third-party scanner working locally, so this could. I don't know, who knows how to do that.
Very educational opportunity for everybody, but yeah, we should make sure we pad the size on this to make sure that folks take time to learn that.
So there is an easy hack for that.
Oh.
It is basically, you can just make your own JSON report artifacts. Sam Kerr on the secure side has been poking around with this, and he's got a lot of the kinks worked out. So
Nice.
he's faking it all out. So you can add whatever you need to inside those structures.
Rad. Okay, cool.
Can we, the person who works on this, can we perhaps document this, maybe create a video? Because I also don't know how to do that. That will be helpful.
Yeah, we should put in the comments. Someone should put in the comments being like, @Sam Kerr, show us how to do this. Cool. So
I'm taking notes in the agenda right now. I will transfer those into comments in the issue shortly.
Oh, thank goodness. I was really hoping somebody was taking notes on our discussion. Thank you so much. Next. Link an existing GitLab issue to security vulnerability. It's kind of like a way to create a new issue. Problem is there's no way to link an existing. Oh, yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so it's like a related issue. So at the top, the button's not here right now, but there's the status here. And if an issue hadn't been linked to the vulnerability already, there would be a create issue button right here. And you click on that and link it to here. And then similar to the first issue, there would be a little history right here. It'd be like, Alexander created an issue from this vulnerability, and there's a link there. And so they're saying, if an issue is created independently of that button, how would we link it to the vulnerability? Oh, here's the create issue button. I just noticed. Okay, so they want to move the button down from up here to down here, and then also use an add issue button. Is that correct, Andy?
Yes. And then thinking about auto remediation too, we would want to maintain that feature's location in the top. So for here, we're just going to allow for the same feature of like creating an issue from, and it's automatically linked to, as well as adding an external issue.
Right, but if there was an MR that could be created from this vulnerability, or a download or patch that could be downloaded, those buttons would still be up here, correct?
I believe so. I'm gonna check in on that because I know there are components that allow for the smaller MR button, but I don't know if that's the right place to do it, since now it's this section of related issues is talking about issues specific. So putting like auto remediate merge request would feel weird.
Right, has related issues.
Yeah, because the auto remediate is basically skipping the step where you would open an issue. Then a person would go in and say, what does it take? I'll open one or more MRs to actually address the security problem. You're just going straight to, it's saying there's a patch available, we've identified it, and it'll just pull in an MR for that patch. So yeah, I think that's kind of why we want to keep the issue portion separate from that auto remediate, since it's a difference of what you're creating.
Okay.
And now the biggest change probably is the ability to unlink an issue that was created from a vulnerability.
Oh, with the little X here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we're at time. So I guess we should all just think about that until next time.
Yeah, we'll keep this one on the agenda for next time. Thanks, Alexander. All right.
Thank you.
I'll share this recording and update the tickets accordingly. Thank you for your time, everyone. Thanks, Alexander, for hosting.
All right. See you, friends.
Bye.